recording Misty coming in late. Okay, just so you guys know, we are recording audio. I have a microphone here, so you're not getting picked up necessarily, so just relax. And about all that anybody will see is back of Misty's head, Tracy's shiny spot, and Blake and Kaylee. So that'd be about it.
You got the phone on.
Yeah, exactly. Sit down.
You made me come in late.
Yeah, that's what it was. All right, so just so you know, we are going to be posting this on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the Martinsville Church of Christ has a YouTube channel. So we're taking advantage of all opportunities to get the message of Jesus Christ out there as possible. All right, with that disclaimer done, we are going to continue our study in, as I said a couple weeks ago, we call it the Arab-Israeli conflict. That is not even a minor misnomer. That is a major misnomer. But we don't exactly know how to call the conflict, because it's not necessarily between Arabs, because Arabs aren't the one who, because of the genealogy, Arabs aren't the one who have the conflict. It is
Shem-Ham conflict is the number.
Yeah, the Shem-Ham conflict is a little odd coming off the tongue, but that's what it is. We understood a couple weeks ago that the conflict doesn't begin with what most people think of as the Ishmael-Isaac issue. It goes back to the sons of Noah. And if we look back at that, we look at the genealogy that goes along with that a couple weeks ago. If you haven't seen that, or you haven't, it's on the Facebook page, it's on our YouTube channel. You can check all those out. Part of the reason why we're recording this is so that it is for future reference. I am going to, real quick, Michelle, would you mind looking at the camera and make sure it looks okay? Yes, sir.
Question, real quick.
Okay.
So we said this conflict goes back to Ham Shem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Since there's such a wide misnomer.
Yes.
That it's tied to Ishmael and so on. Is there a tie to that? Is there somewhere that ties in as well?
Are you asking if the connection is Shem and Ham, or
Ishmael. Is there an Ishmael context to this as
See,
well?
Gene's jumping ahead to the end of today's lesson already. Okay. So, man, that's how good he is. Gene was asking the question if there is the connection from Ishmael back to Shem and Ham. So the rough answer is yes and no. So the genealogy will say yes, but no.
Well, I can wait till then.
Okay, all right. So today we're going to talk about, with that being said, we understand that there was this curse on, not Ham, one of the sons of Noah. Who was the curse on? Canaan. The curse was on Canaan, which is Ham's son. Now that's important because he doesn't put a curse. The curse does not go on any other of Ham's sons. It goes on Canaan. So where does Canaan end up?
In the land of Canaan.
In the land of Canaan. Down here. Okay? So there's a reason why this is a big deal. If there's a curse on Canaan, that land is not his. He just migrates there. Okay? So the major fight is, we'll talk about it again, we just keep saying, it's over dirt. It's over dirt. It's over dirt and birthright. Okay? The birthright is important. We're going to learn a lot more about the birthright idea as we go through the rest of the lesson. It's a big deal today, too. So we go from the sons of Noah, and we progress further into the Abrahamic epic. Okay? The Abrahamic epic. And Abraham begins differently. He begins as who? Abram. Okay? So Abram roughly translated means exalted father. Now, when Abram is given the name Abram, he's not a father. So this is the confusion. His father is named Terah. So we're going to look here. If you look up on the, if you can see that, all the way back up to Noah and Shem. I can't find my stick. I couldn't find it this morning. Anyway, you go back all the way up to the Noah. You follow it all the way down to Terah. You can see that a little bit better now. There's Terah. Sons of Terah are Haran, Nahor, Abraham or Abram, and those are the three sons of Terah. And Abram is originally called Abram because of Terah. So he's named for his exalted father. That's one view of calling him Abram. So he's the firstborn. There is one of the translations that says exalted of the father. So Abram being exalted of the father. Why would that be the case? Abram is the oldest, and so the oldest is the exalted of the father. That is a likely reason why we call him Abram. He gains the name Abraham later on, and Abraham is father of many. That's the translation of Abraham, Abraham, the father of many. So you go from exalted father to father of many, or exalted of the father. That all make sense? Okay. He gets that name when he becomes a father. Or soon to be Abraham over here, father of many, right?
I hope.
See, I'm trying. I'm trying. So, if you look down through here, you can see also some things in the genealogy about Terah's sons. And what you'll see is Haran is the father of who? Very notable. Who? Lot. Other would be Iscah. And of Lot, you see Moab, you get the Moabites. Ben-Ami, you get the Ammonites. Ben-Ami is what? Son of Ammon. So, you get the Ammonites. Well, he's not the son of Ammon, is he? He's the son of Lot. You know what Lot's other name is? You can guess. Ammon. You got it. Man, you guys are killing this. This is great. All right, so you follow down through there as well. You see Nahor and the sons of Nahor. Of Nahor, you see one person that sticks out there from Kemuel is Aram or Aram. Now, there are two thoughts about Aram. Aram would be the father of some of these folks. The language of Arab, Arab, and therefore you get Arabic. Or he is the one who really honestly founds the language of Aramaic. Okay? So there are three basic Semite or Shemite languages. Do you know what those languages are? Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. Arabic is a Semite language. So, if Arabic is a Semite language, and there are people within a certain religion who are anti-Semitic, what are they? They're anti-Arab. They're anti-themselves. But they're not, because we're going to find out that there is no connection. There is no connection between what they believe and what is reality. Okay? So there is, and you can see here, Abraham's, you can see there, I can see here. You can see there Abraham's connections. You have Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. How many of you knew about Keturah? That was his other wife that he had children with, and you can see those children, and they are Zimran, Jokshan, which had sons of Sheba and Dedan. Sheba and Dedan are in the south of the Arabian Peninsula, is where they end up, and you have a little place called Sheba, which becomes the area of what we now know as Yemen. Okay? Then you have Midian, Ishbak, Shua. Midian is important because Midian ends up being in the Sinai Peninsula, on the southwestern edge of the Sinai Peninsula. I have a Sinai. I'll show it to you. I'll point that out later. And so we have this group that Moses runs across when he gets kicked out of Egypt. And who does he run into? A group called the Midianites. And the Midianites were these kind of shepherding, semi-nomadic people who lived in a general area, but they were shepherds. So they just guided their sheep where they wanted to go. And those are the Midianites that Moses connects with. Are you catching all this? There's a lot of really cool connections in geography and genealogy that really make a connection with our faith. Yes?
Was it Hagar was Sarah's handmaiden?
Yep.
That she threw out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, did you guys look at my notes? Okay, all right.
Smart.
You just got it. Okay.
I'm just trying to put a puzzle together.
Then you got Hagar and Ishmael. You can see how many do you count here? Somebody count that while I'm talking. 12. I'll be doggone. There's 12 tribes of Ishmael. How about that? And then Sarah, you have Isaac, who marries Rebekah, and then his sons, Jacob and Esau. And then the whole epic that goes along with Jacob and Esau. That's a big deal too, right? Okay, so let's get into the story of Abraham and the covenant. So go in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. While you're looking up there, everybody kind of, I need some people to grab Genesis 12, 2 and 3. Somebody to grab Genesis 15, 7, and 13 through 18. And then Genesis 22, 15 through 18. So pick one of those and get ready to read it out loud for me, please. Who's got Genesis 12, 2 and 3? Just read it out loud.
I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing.
Okay, so that's the first real occasion where God says to Abraham, we're together, we're covenanted. I'm going,
More. You
but
said
there,
2 and
but
3.
2 and 3.
I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you.
There you go. So the ones who curse his descendants, this is part of the fight. If you look back at the genealogy, the claim is one of his descendants is Ishmael, his first descendant, which would be the what? The oldest, therefore gains the birthright. And if you gain the birthright, you not only get to gain his land and his possessions, but you are now ruling over the entire household, which means your nephews, your uncle, everybody that's associated with the household, you're now in charge of all of that. Okay, so that's why the birthright is so very important. It's not just a matter of, well, I get all the stuff. It's now you are Lord. You're the patriarch. You are in charge of all of it. You dictate what happens within the entire household. Okay, so that's a big deal. So if they're laying claim to that covenant that says, if whoever curses you will be cursed, I'll bless all of it. Okay? So if you're trying to make the connection to Ishmael, that's why you're trying to claim that. Go ahead, Diane.
Also, back in those days, it's not so much today, but the blessing was huge.
It's massive. It was the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Having the blessing or the birthright, the blessing is paramount. I mean, that's what everybody was looking for. You were, for your daughter, you were hoping that she marries into the eldest, because then you're now the queen, right? You're now the honored one in that. So this was huge to get that blessing. Okay? So now let's go to 15 verses 7 and 13 through 18.
He also said unto him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it.
Okay. All right.
He's saying this to Abram, right?
Yes, this is all to Abram. And then go ahead, verses 13 through 18. In chapter 15.
Looking for it. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure.
Okay.
On to 18.
Yes.
When the sun had set and the darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great rivers of the Euphrates.
Oh
The
my.
land, okay, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my. Did you hear that? There's the claim. So, to the Euphrates, and we'll look at the map here in just a minute, of showing all the land that is going to be promised to his descendants. Okay? Now, he's talked about that 400-year period. What happens sometime down the line here? Does this guy look familiar? That's during that time. There was a great famine. Joseph gets sold off into captivity into Egypt, and then he gets a pretty prominent position. There's a famine, and who comes to Egypt? Jacob and the brothers, right? The brothers come first, and then they send for the father, and it brings them. And then from that point on, about 400 years, they're there. Okay? So the covenant is there. And the Egyptians end up with a Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph. That's what the Scripture tells us. He didn't know Joseph. In other words, I don't recognize the fact that Joseph is number two or his family is prominent here no longer. And so they were cast off to do the will then of the Egyptians instead of being honored among the Egyptians. Big change. For 400 years that happens. Along comes a guy like Moses and says, hey, we're heading out. Guess who they take with them when they leave Egypt? The body of Joseph. Joseph's bones, excuse me. All right, and then on to 22, verses 15 through 18.
The angel of the Lord.
Nice. That was just in stereo. It was nice.
Go ahead. No, please, by all means, you go.
The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me.
Okay, so did you happen to notice that there were 3 covenants with Noah? We just read 3 covenants with Noah, didn't we?
3 covenants or 1 covenant repeated 3 times?
It's a good question, but if you notice, there are 3 different things that are mentioned along with the covenant. The last one is different because the last one says, because of your obedience. Now, prior to that, his first covenant with Abram is, you're my guy, and I'm going to choose you, and we're going to have a covenant relationship. Abram had not really done much of anything, right? You go to Noah. Noah was seen to be a righteous man in the sight of God, right? So he was picked out by God because of his righteousness. Abram, we just don't know a whole lot about Abram other than these are the descendants, and then all of a sudden Abram shows up, and God says, I'm going to show you a way, and I'm going to send you there. You're going to be my guy, okay? And then he makes that covenant. Then he goes partway through, and then he talks about the land. So there are 3 basic covenants with Abram or Abraham. All right, now what I want to do is back up just a little bit to the genealogy. Terah's sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran dies early on. He dies in the great city of Ur. Ur in the Chaldees. Haran is Lot's father. Lot is the oldest, therefore everything that is Haran's goes to Lot. However, who is Terah's number 1? Abram. So Abram is responsible for the household of Haran, which is Lot. Okay, so Lot is in charge of Haran's stuff and Haran's area, but Abram is the overseer over Lot. So Lot kind of depends upon that as well. That's why there's this connection in this story between Lot and Abram. So, and when Haran dies, Abram says, my brother is dead. Now I have to take care of my brother's household. Okay? So that was part of the responsibility. And we move to the covenants. We just talked about those covenants and how important they are. So Abram is set up, and he is from, we'll get a little bit closer. I just want to give you a big aerial type view. You know, Egypt, Ethiopia. This is where I was talking about down here. That's Yemen and some of those people. The Midianites who have been up in there. Abram is from a little place called Ur of the Chaldees. It says Chaldee, but of Chaldean. Okay? That's where Abram is originated from. So when we read the promise of his land going from where to where? Off in Egypt somewhere, right? All the way to Euphrates. Guess what river runs by Ur in the Chaldees? You have the Tigris and the Euphrates up in Babylon, and it runs towards the Persian Gulf. Okay? So from the land of Ur, basically from the Persian Gulf, all the way past where we call Egypt now, all the way to the Mediterranean, and down along the crescent, as we call it, that's all to be Abram's. Are you catching me? At that day and time, that is 90% of the known world. Is all promised to Abram from God. Okay? That's pretty immense, right? So, he starts here. You look at Genesis chapter 11, verse 31. It says where he was from. He makes a promise, and he says, I got a land I'm going to show you. Right? So, where do? They take off from Ur, and they go to another place. Where do they go from there? A little place called Haran. And that is far eastern Turkey, western part of Iran, and places like that. So he goes to Haran. Haran, we will find out later. This is odd because I don't want to give everything away all at once. But we find out later that there are some really interesting series going on right now about the origins and the birth and the life of Muhammad and the beginning of Islam. It is likely that Islam starts, the first writings of Islam, which don't happen until almost the 9th century, almost 280 years after Muhammad dies. Interesting, right? They happen up there. This is where the majority of these writings occur. In a land where Abram was promised and moved towards first. So he's moving to the west and then down. There's a reason why he didn't go straight through. I want to back up. You see Ur? Why didn't he just go from Ur to Jerusalem? Huh? Nobody goes through there. There is not a fight over the land between Ur and Jerusalem right now. Nobody fights over that land. Want to know why? It's worthless. The only thing that might be out there is some black goo that's way down in the ground. And that's the only reason why they'd fight over it. You know what the black goo is, right? Oral. Right? So, why he didn't do that? Plus, who was showing him the way? God says, I'll show you. So he wanted him to go this way. Okay? If I were to give you a piece of property, this is fun. When we went looking at property down in Kentucky, we were going to buy a place down there. It was amazing. First of all, it was scary. But they would give you these descriptions, land descriptions. And almost every one of them would say approximately 27 acres. Well, I've got a friend who inherited a piece of property down there near West Liberty, and it said, and that's why I said 27 acres, it said approximately 27 acres. He got down there, and he finally started looking at the description, and And when you looked at the description, it was like, the big rock in the middle of the creek going to the oak on the, that was written in 1845, right? Well, it turns out it was 72 acres or 73 acres, something like that. It was more than double the amount of acreage. And he had to fight with his neighbor about who owned what property. Well, when you say approximately 27 acres or whatever it was, who knows? Well, that fence has been in my family for 125 years, that kind of thing. That's what you get into. Well, your fence is in the wrong spot. So, if Abram is going to inherit through the covenant all the land that's described, what do you see? All the land that's described, right? So if you're going to inherit it and you get a new piece of property, you guys got to Colorado and got that piece of property. Did you go look at all of the property? You wanted to see all of the property, didn't you? Yeah. If you were to buy a new piece of land, would you go looking around at all of your property that you just purchased? Sure. That's why it's an odd thing in the New Testament when it talks about the guy who didn't come to the banquet because what did he say? He bought a field and wanted to go see it.
You got it on the internet.
Yeah, sight unseen. Stupid excuse. Anyway, so this is why, because he has to go up in these areas to understand. I've been in these lands. These are what's promised to him.
But he only saw small portions.
That's right. He didn't get to see it all. I mean, it'd be near impossible.
Yes.
Yeah. So then he travels further. If you look at verses 1 through 18 of chapter 13, he travels over into Egypt and a couple other specific places. If you look at those verses, we're not going to read them all. But he goes over into Egypt and a couple other places in that area. Now, to get there, what does he have to go through? What's up in the far right corner?
Canaan.
The Canaan land. He's got to go past that. Well, he stops there for a little while and kind of makes camp, but he's an outsider to them. Okay? But he's permitted to stay there for a little bit. There's a little bit of an issue, so what do? They move on, and they go to Egypt. God is showing him the land. Now, you think he gets to Egypt and go, wow, I mean, the Nile Valley is lush. It's beautiful. It's got lots of stuff. It's a trade route, and, you think, okay, if you're Abram, you get to Egypt and you go, this must be the place. Because at that point, he's seen Ur, which is not bad. Ur's not a terrible place as far as that goes. And he gets up into Haran, kind of rugged land. He works his way down through the Jordan Valley, through Judea, what we now know as Judea, through the Canaan land. Canaan, Gaza, kind of nice, along the coast. It's pretty. He crosses the Sinai, not pretty. He gets to the Egypt and to the Nile Valley and goes, this has got to be it, right? God says, no, that's not it. Now, notice that when they leave Egypt, we're going to tell the story about the Egypt situation there, but all right, we'll talk about Egypt. Let's do that now. So they get to Egypt, and I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Sarah was a hottie. Sarah was pretty, all right? And Abraham was worried because Sarah was pretty. At that point, Sarai, she hadn't got her name yet, official. And he says, tell you what, when we get to Egypt, tell everybody you're my sister. Tell everybody you're my sister. Because if they think you're my sister, then you're safe.
He's safe too.
Yeah, I'm safe, you're safe. They're not going to come after me and kill me to get to you. You're just my sister. And they'll treat you better because you're my sister. Why? You're kind of part of my entourage, my property, kind of. But what happens? The Pharaoh sees Sarai and sees that she's pretty and says, I think you need to come over here with me. Long story short, what happens? The Pharaoh figures it out, right?
Yeah, he gets cursed.
Huh?
Bad things start to happen to his household.
Yeah.
He realizes.
Bad stuff comes the Pharaoh's way, and he says, hold on a minute. Now, this is an interesting thing because if you look throughout history, think about the people on the boat with Jonah. They're in the storm, and they go, hey, something's not right here. and they look at Jonah, right? So even the people who are not, and it happens quite often, even people who are not people of God, when they see the curses of God, when they see God working, they go, hold on a minute. I mean, God sometimes has to be really pretty overt. He has to be kind of out in the open about it, but he exposes that. So same thing with the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh. That happens, and he says, he finally figures it all out because of the curses, because of all the things that happen, the bad things that happen, and he looks at Abraham and he says, why didn't you tell me? Right? And so, what happens as a result of all that? They leave. That, again, long story short. We won't get into the whole epic of that. We just don't have time. The Abrahamic epic is an entire story, series all to itself. So they leave. Now, find it interesting because they leave where? Egypt. And they go back towards Haran. They leave Egypt. Egypt. Are you catching me? What do they take with them when they leave Egypt? The Pharaoh says, not only will you get out, take some stuff with you. That was a common practice. I'll give you stuff if you'll leave. Right? It's kind of like going to my mom's house. You never leave empty-handed. Ever. All right?
Does she give you stuff to get out?
Sometimes. So Abram gets stuff to leave, or as he's leaving, right? It was kind of honorable to do that too, to say, as you leave my country, take some things with you. What do you suppose one of the things he took with him was? Sarai. And anybody? Hagar. Hagar is an Egyptian.
That was Sarah's handmaid.
Uh-huh. They wouldn't have picked her up in Haran. They wouldn't have picked her up in Canaan. They would have picked her up in Egypt. She was Egyptian. And if she was Egyptian, what tribe was she originally from?
That's what I'm trying, was it Shem?
Ham.
Ham.
Because
Shem is good.
one of the sons of Ham is later named Egypt.
So that gives us the Ishmael connection then.
Correct. So, the connection here is they pick up Hagar in Egypt. She's Egyptian, which means she is of the tribe of Ham. They are now connected with the tribe of, she's working for the tribe of Shem. And so when we get into this mess about Ishmael, Ishmael is now a half and half.
He's a sham.
He's a sham. Good night, everybody. Tip your waiter on the way out.
I'll be here all week.
Try the veal, it's delicious. So you're now catching some of the connections, right? So they head out from Egypt, they go back, and they end up in the Canaan land. Now, where do they end up? They end up in Kadesh Barnea and in the Negev. That's called the Negev. Now, back then it was Negeb, okay? No big deal. So they end up in this area, and while they're there, they're kind of treated kind of rough by the people of Canaan. Because why? You're camping in our land. They set up tents in the Canaan land. And some of the Canaanites, not real happy about it. Why do you suppose the Canaanites weren't happy about it?
Because they were hammers.
They were from the tribe of Ham. And Abram was from the tribe of Shem. And they knew about the curse. Okay? So that's the first thing. This is our land. We scampered off here when we got kicked out, when we got cursed. This is our spot. Leave us alone. Abram says, I don't think so. Because I got this thing going on between me and God. Now, the Canaanites were not acknowledging God. They were polytheistic. They were polytheistic, which means they had many gods. Same as the Egyptians, polytheistic. at this point in time, the only group of people that were monotheistic, one God, would be the Shemites, the Semites. Okay? Now, later on, it's introduced into Japheth, into the tribe of Japheth, which all of those people are just up in Europe. So, you remember Ashkenaz? Remember I talked about Ashkenaz? When I talked about the Ashkenazi Jews? So the monotheism works its way into the tribe of Japheth, and it works, that's how Judaism gets into Europe. That's how the worship of one God, the God, gets into Europe, is through that connection with Japheth. They did intermarry some. There wasn't a whole lot of connection. There wasn't a whole lot of intermarrying going on between the tribe of Shem and Ham, but it did happen. And you get kind of these offshoot half and halves as well. All right, so that all said and done, as we go down through here and we look at all these stories that happen, you can see here, they go from Hur to Haran, they go from Shechem and Canaan, and then they go from Bethel to Ai, the Negeb, then they go down to Egypt. Okay, this is all the place I'm telling you about. Down to Egypt, they come back out, they end up in Bethel, which is in Samaria, okay? So Bethel, which Bet-El means the second place of God, the second house of worship God, the second of God. Back to Ai, and then to Zoar and Canaan and Hebron. These are all the places where he kind of works his way around as he's trying to find his spot. And along comes a guy, a king. Anybody know the name of the king we're going to talk about? Or the high priest, the king in Israel? Melchizedek is now king of Jerusalem. Jerusalem. Anybody know what Jerusalem means? Solemn is peace. The place of peace. So Melchizedek is in charge of the city of peace, or the place of peace. That's Jerusalem.
Where did Melchizedek come from? Shem, Japheth, or Ham?
Heaven.
Yeah. He's a Semite. He's a Semite. He's a Semite who has not been introduced to, well, I'll say this. He was definitely a monotheist. Okay? So monotheism, the earliest connection we have of human beings kind of staying in Jerusalem is right about here. All right? This is very early. We're talking 2100 to 2200 or more BC.
Now, would this been a city?
Yes. Yeah, city-state. Everything was a city-state. So if you were
But
king of
like
this...
city, it wasn't just a bunch of tents
No.
thrown up on a hill?
No. By this time, Jerusalem is established as a city. It has a king. And the king priest is Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek shows up a lot throughout the Old Testament. And what we find out is Melchizedek is kind of a mysterious character in that he may... people may have named their sons Melchizedek later on to make the connection to Melchizedek. History doesn't say a whole lot about Melchizedek except for in the Bible. And we know later on that there is this connection to Melchizedek for the idea of being high priest, right? And then Jesus is made connected to Melchizedek, right? So again, we can do a whole other study on Melchizedek, but what I want to do is introduce him to you in the Abrahamic epic in regards to how they kind of are permitted to stay in the land. Okay? So he uses Melchizedek to get Abram to be permitted to stay in the land. So they find their way to that area and they stay there. They now are established in that land, around Hebron and in the Canaan land. They kind of stay outside of the Canaan land. But they're welcome in Jerusalem now because of Melchizedek. So Abram finds this beautiful place that he wants to settle down with his family, which is kind of a crazy thing because up until that point in time, what had they been doing? picking up tents and moving around and around and around. Look at all the places that we know they had been, all of these places, and back up there. So they'd surveyed all this place, and they settle down finally. And when Abram settles down, he finally says, you know what? I remember this point where God says I was supposed to have a son. I'm supposed to have children, be the father of many. Right? I think it's time. Now, at this point, he's like 79 years old or something like that. So it's been a little while. Sarai is old, and she's basically past birthing age as far as everybody is concerned. But Abram says, but I've been promised, right? I have this promise to have sons. So Sarai comes up with a great idea. What's the great idea? Go get my maidservant pregnant. Ladies? No? Okay. Moving right along. We won't go any further than that. Abram, gentlemen, if that situation comes to you, I've got 2 letters for you. N-O. No. Don't do that. Okay? Here's the reason why.
Wasn't that a thing in that day?
It kind of was. But it was still not considered legitimate.
Okay.
It would still not be an heir. Unless it was Sarai, no way you're having children. No way you're having children. If you're barren, there's no way you're having children, then we can let that happen.
Surrogate.
Basically using a surrogate, correct. But the unfortunate part with that was Hagar, if that were the case, Hagar basically has to go, not my son. It's the son of Abram and Sarah. It is the household's son. Yes, sir.
When does that attitude shift? Because Jacob had
Kind of pulls the same trick.
kids by 4 different women,
Mhm.
and they were the 12 tribes, equal sons of
Correct.
Jacob.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there we had a
Yeah.
shift of
It is much later. It is much later. And this is part of the reason why when Paul writes about, like, say, elders, those are to be leaders, he says you are to be the husband of but one wife. And part of this is...
tied to no man can serve 2 masters, right?
Anyway, Hagar. Hagar. Yes, ma'am.
Wasn't that a custom though to have many wives?
Yes. Why?
Go forth. Because you started out with 8 people.
Correct. I mean, 1,000 years prior or so, we were down to 8 people on the planet. Pretty common for that to happen. You got to multiply there somehow. I mean, gross, sisters, first cousins. I mean, that's how we get... Oh, this is recorded. I was going to say something else, but anyway, go on YouTube. I'll get in trouble if I say the thing I was about to say. Excuse me. Anyway, but yes, it was common practice. It shifts later, much later in the Old Testament. And part of the reason for this is to be distinct, because the rest of the world still did the multiple wife thing. And that's part of the reason why we are called to do that, is to be distinct, to be separated. I mean, that's why the Levitical laws, why the Mosaic laws are put into place. Not because the laws are much better or greater. I mean, they're generally better for you. But the idea is that everybody else doesn't follow these laws. You are to be distinct. That's what he tells Abraham. You are to be distinct. You're to be set apart. You're to be sanctified, set apart for a purpose. And so Abram has to do that. He has to get himself to the point where he is set apart for a purpose. He doinks it up. He messes it up here and follows Sarai's... Again, dude, you're in charge of the household. It's your household. Sarai says, go get her maidservant pregnant. You say, me and God have a covenant. This is going to happen. But he falls for it. He does it, and Ishmael is born. Several years go by. Could be anywhere from 15, 17 to 20-something years. All right, so we know Abram was about 79, about the time God comes to him again and says, you don't understand. This is not what I had planned. Sarah's going to get pregnant. And they say, wait a minute. We're both 100 years old, give or take. Okay? We're 100 years old. This ain't happening. God says, you've not been listening really well. I'm telling you it's going to happen. I said you were going to be the father of many nations, many people. You will be. And so Sarah gets pregnant. Sarai gets pregnant, and she has Isaac. Now, it says, gosh, there's so much, man. There's no way I'm going to get to it all today.
So let's take Isaac on next week.
What would Hagar's part be in that story? Just do what I'm told?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why the issue becomes the issue
Okay.
between her and Sarai. She immediately, I mean, as soon as Ishmael was born, Sarah, not even before that, Sarah said, before, yeah, she was like, Sarah said, nah, I'm not digging this. And I'm like, if you read this story, you go, Sarah, what do you want?
Go do this. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she kicks him out, and Abram says, no, that's not how we do things. He brings him back. God meets with Hagar as well and says, you need to go back. They're accepted back in. Ishmael is born, and then the fighting starts again through Sarah. Sarah starts all this mess. Yes, ma'am.
But the Lord promises to bless Ishmael.
That's correct.
That time too,
That's correct.
to make him a father of many nations.
Uh-huh. But he also says something about Ishmael. Do you know what else he says about Ishmael? He'd be like a wild donkey.
But Ishmael was actually from a cursed nation of Ham.
Half and half.
Well, yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was by both. But he wasn't pure.
But Hagar was that,
Right.
and now connected to Ham and Shem
Mm-hmm.
is Ishmael.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hagar was in this though too, though, with the fighting with Sarah though.
Mhm.
She wanted.
And this wasn't one-sided.
She wanted Ishmael to have all of it too.
Hagar says Ishmael's firstborn. So what was Hagar trying to do?
One up.
Replace
Take whose place?
Sarah.
Sarah's place. She basically was saying, that old hag can't even have a baby. I've heard this. All right? I gave you a child. Right. She can't. Ishmael is your son. Okay? So there's an argument when we get to Isaac, even among those who believe, the Islamic tradition believes that Ishmael was the one on the altar to be sacrificed, not Isaac. Because he says, take your son, your only son, okay?
But Ishmael would not have been recognized as the son once Isaac was there.
That's the fight. Hagar was basically trying to say, okay, this is our way back in. This is the way back in. And we can get back into God's grace here. We can get back in, not God's grace, but back into ownership. We can get out of the curse. We can get out of the curse if we can get Ishmael to be recognized as Abram's son. So,
Ultimately, it's all about stuff.
George Carlin. You heard George Carlin. He said, the meaning of life is stuff. This is evidence. To many people, the meaning of life is stuff. So what was Hagar truly after?
Stuff.
Yeah.
See,
The dirt, the stuff, the blessing, as you were talking about, she was after that for Ishmael.
I elevate this even beyond that. This is not a battle against flesh and blood.
No.
It's a battle against powers and principalities of
Yep.
darkness in the heavenly realm.
Yeah.
You know, it translates into stuff.
Yeah.
But
And then it's crazy. I can't tell you how much stuff I omitted in this morning's lesson. I mean, we talked very little about Egypt. We talked very little about other stuff.
We could probably do months.
As I said,
on just one of
it's an
these
Abrahamic
sides.
epic, okay? And you don't do an epic in 40 minutes, all right? I mean, Kevin Costner can't talk about his lunch in 2 hours, all right, in a movie. So
If you could do that, it would be epic.
it would be epic if you could pull that off in 40 minutes. So anyway, we're down to this area right here. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we move on. And so then we'll get to Isaac next and how that makes all these other connections so we can get down to the other covenants and all the other, man, this is just, yeah. I hope that we are getting a better perspective and an idea on why there's this conflict going on. That's the point of this entire lesson series, is to give us an idea as to why. Imagine if you were from the tribe of Ishmael down the line and you're thinking, that should be ours. We should be the honored ones. There were 12 tribes, you know? And so that just keeps going down and down and down. But what we're going to find out much later on, not much later on, but as we find out as we look at the 12 tribes of Ishmael, where they are on the map and where the claim is to current claims of being the group, you'll see that the connection, it gets cut off very, very soon. Okay? All right. Thank you guys so much. God bless. We'll see you over there.
This isn't a 10-piece puzzle, this is like a 1,000-piece puzzle.
Yeah, this isn't, it's like a 3D puzzle.
Well, you could, like I said, each one of them